This week on Christian World News, the Great Quarantine Revival, how more than 100,000 people have turned to Jesus Christ through internet, social media, and online streaming. Plus, as questions surround the leadership in North Korea, we remember the tens of thousands of Christians imprisoned there and bring you the story of one woman who escaped at great cost. And the God who heals, this man found comfort after his wife's death by literally walking with God. Hear the message God gave him to share. Welcome to Christian World News, everyone. I'm Wendy Griffith. A great quarantine revival is bringing people all around the globe to Jesus Christ through the internet as God moves on people's hearts during this global pandemic. Evangelist Nick Hall says more than 100,000 people made known their desire to put their faith in Christ, mainly through 2 Easter week events hosted by his evangelistic ministry, Pulse. An estimated 1.7 million people in 167 countries took part through YouTube and Facebook, responding to the gospel call through email, text, and international call centers. Well, Nick Hall of Pulse joins us now for more on these exciting events. Nick, welcome to Christian World News.
Hey, Wendy, glad to be here.
Great to have you. Well, tell us about these 2 major events. Who took part? What was it all about?
You know, our desire was we believe that this is the greatest evangelistic opportunity of our lifetime. People are hurting. All of us have had misplaced hope upended. And I think that now is the time that people are looking for answers. They're looking for Jesus. And so on the one side, we wanted to rally the global church, leaders from around the world who are weary and are not immune to the pain of this crisis. We did an event called Leader Check-In. We had over 1 million pastors and leaders join in. This was about emotional, practical, spiritual advice. People like David Platt, people like Francis Chan, Priscilla Shirer, Michael W. Smith, Carrie Job, trying to pour into the church to get ready for what we believed was going to be the greatest Easter weekend that we've ever experienced in terms of the relevance of the gospel. We followed that up with a digital Good Friday global broadcast event. It went into 43 languages, 100+ nations. And that we know of, we have now seen over 117,000 people respond to the gospel by text, email, or phone calls.
Wow, you definitely have some well-known figures there. Well, you said this idea came to you, Nick, when you called out to God. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, you know, I have been through a crisis personally in the last 9 months. My sister had pancreatic cancer. She died 2 months ago. And just in going through this crisis, I have never been gripped more with an urgency for eternity. Now, thankfully, my sister knew Jesus. I know she's home and not in pain anymore. But I have just felt so consumed with urgency for the people who are dying and hurting. And I know all of us are suffering right now, but there are some people whose suffering is literally between heaven and hell. And so I have just felt this consuming from the Spirit of God as I've cried out and said, God, would you come to the rescue of these church leaders who are hurting and broken? And God, would you give us a vision? And I can't even begin to explain how in 2 weeks' time, these events came together from idea to completion, to go from an idea that we didn't even have on the books, there wasn't even a reference for it, to things that impacted literally hundreds of millions of people around the world. The only explanation is this is a quarantine revival. We're not saying we did it. We're saying God is doing a new thing, and that now is the time to bring the light and the love of Jesus Christ.
Amen. Nick, we are so sorry for your loss. I can't even imagine. But quarantine revival, wow, that is a great phrase and something great to be birthed out of that pain. You had responses coming in from all over the world, as many as 100,000 professing faith in Christ. Tell us more about that.
People responded across Russia, all across Eastern Europe. We had gospel responses from Indonesia, the largest Muslim nation on earth. We had gospel responses from China coming in from mainland, Hong Kong. It went into Cantonese and Mandarin. We also had people responding across India. I mean, imagine India, 1 billion+ people quarantined, stuck in their homes. It's illegal there for them to leave. Most of their homes are not like ours. It's a one-bedroom home. The families are big. They're crammed in there. And over Easter weekend, it literally was a move of God. We were able to get this broadcast on the main secular television channels in prime time. Literally, the Holy Spirit walking into these people's homes and letting them know about the God who saves, the God who takes on our suffering on the cross, the God who takes away the pain and the sting of sin and death through the resurrection. Responses came in through Nigeria, throughout Africa, Central and South America. This was literally the global church mobilizing, risking their lives to get the gospel out. And again, there's 117,000 recorded decisions we know of. I believe there's millions more people who are hungry, who are turning to Jesus. I think that this is the greatest evangelistic moment that we've ever seen in our lifetime.
This is amazing, Nick, but do you think it will continue once we open back up to business and the kids go back to school and we go back to work?
You know, my prayer during this whole time has absolutely been, God, would you stop the pandemic? Would you stop the sickness? Would you stop the pain? But Wendy, what I'm praying more than that is that this pandemic wouldn't be wasted. I do believe that this is a moment of revival and reformation in the church. God is stripping back a lot of things in our lives, you know, that maybe we have placed hope in the wrong things, not in Jesus, not in multiplication, not in discipleship. And for the lost, I think that right now there is a window of time. And I do think that this is the beginning of revival and awakening. It will continue. But in the same breath, we all know that the second quarantine is over, it's business as usual for people again. They're back to their money. They're back to their false hope and their idols. They're back to the party scene. And so I do believe that this is a unique time where literally the whole world is on pause collectively. We don't have the things we normally numb out with. We don't have the things we normally put our hope in. Even our health is vulnerable.
Even Starbucks is closed. Even Starbucks is closed. Nick,
what are you going to do?
Honestly, I could talk to you all day. Thank you, Nick, for not missing this moment. So many lives have been changed. God bless you. Thank you so much.
God bless you, Wendy. Thank you.
All right, that was Nick Hall with Pulse. Well, across the world, the church is stepping up to help those in need. In Taiwan, they're working together to ship much-needed masks, gowns, and gloves to the U.S. This story comes to us from our partners in Taipei at Good TV.
As the pandemic rages on, medical equipment continues to be in short supply. Churches in Taiwan have joined together to raise funds to purchase much-needed medical supplies to give to countries in urgent need.
I feel Taiwan has a destiny. This destiny is to bless the nations and be a blessing to them. When the nations are facing this crisis, Taiwan can't stand by. We remember the story of Isaac. When he faced a severe famine, he didn't give up, get mad or sulk. Instead, he planted crops and reaped 100-fold.
As the medical supplies arrive at the warehouse, they are unloaded and inspected before being shipped off for distribution by local governments. The supplies include body bags, gloves, surgical gowns, and goggles, which will go to hard-hit areas and countries with critical shortages.
Giving body bags breaks my heart. The U.S. government projected 100,000 deaths. This is very serious. During the Korean War and the Vietnam War, the U.S. had about 50,000 casualties each. Vietnam had 50,000 casualties over 20 years, but now 100,000 will die in a few months. This is very distressing. As we send out the supplies, on the boxes we'll put stickers. The stickers will say things like, "God bless the U.S., Italy, or Spain," from Christian churches in Taiwan.
During this time of lockdowns, churches in Taiwan have instead issued the call for people to help other nations in the fight against the pandemic.
Thank you, Good TV. Well, up next, North Korea's secret believers amid concerns about who's in charge of the communist country. We introduce you to one Christian who escaped the brutal regime.
He
founded one of the world's largest television ministries.
Welcome, folks, to the 700 Club.
Formed a global relief organization demonstrating God's love in action.
Thank you for helping us.
Established a leading university.
Graduates, flip your tassels!
And became a New York Times best-selling author. Now, Pat Robertson wants to share with you significant insights learned from a lifetime in the Word of God. In his latest book, 10 Laws for Success, Keys to Win in Work, Family, and Finance, you'll discover the laws that govern success and how they can work for you. A real-world guidebook that can revolutionize your life. Call now, 1-800-700-7000, or go to cbn.com to receive Pat Robertson's latest book, 10 Laws for Success.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30. As the world watches from the outside,
it's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
It's what starts in Israel, then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Turmoil in North Korea as questions swirl around who's in control of that communist country. The regime has put as many as 30,000 Christians in prison for their faith, but you're about to meet one woman who made it out. George Thomas has her story from Seoul.
Her name is Kim Yoo-jin, age 31. She was born in Pyongyang, North Korea. Kim's testimony is rare considering the numbers on North Korea. The CIA estimates that some 24 million people live in the communist country, and the best guess is about 2%, or 480,000, are Christians. Just a handful of them have escaped from the brutal regime and lived to tell their story. Kim Yoo-jin is one of them.
Growing up, I was told by the authorities that there was no God in this world. We were ordered instead to worship Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, the leaders of the country.
Freedom of religion is guaranteed under North Korea's constitution, but it's never encouraged. What was it like being a believer in North Korea?
We met every Saturday evening. My family gathered in the back room of our small apartment. We had to be very quiet. We whispered when we prayed, sang songs, or read the Bible. We often covered our heads to muffle the noise.
Growing up, she heard stories of how her city, Pyongyang, was once known as the Jerusalem of the East. In 1945, 13% of the population was Christian. The city was the center of Christianity on the Korean peninsula. Half a century later, Kim's faith made her a target.
My parents often asked me to stay outside the apartment on Saturdays to make sure no one was coming while the family prayed inside. We couldn't allow anyone to know what was going on.
Over time, the meetings grew to include a few friends and extended family.
We had one Bible in the house. My grandmother, who was a believer from the Japanese imperial times, had a Chinese Bible. She translated the Bible by hand into the Korean language on pieces of paper. That's how we read the Bible. We found strength in those pages.
But soon the authorities discovered that her father was a secret believer.
My father was a tailor in town, and the police suspected something was going on. We believed they planted listening devices in his shop and on his clothes.
In 1994, the authorities discovered that Miss Kim's father was operating an underground church in North Korea. So they raided the home, arrested him along with an uncle. Both men probably ended up in one of the 6 labor camps in North Korea. Do you remember that day?
The day my father was arrested, I was at school, but I'll never forget that day. He hugged me before I left for school, and like every other day, he reminded me to be careful. Every morning at the breakfast table, he would tell us that one day the government will come and arrest us for being Christians. He warned us of the price we would someday pay for our faith. I remember him saying often that even if I face death, I will follow Jesus.
Some 200,000 prisoners are being held in political prison camps in North Korea. An estimated 30,000 of them are Christians. The regime is routinely cited for human rights violations. Won Jae-chun is a professor of law in South Korea.
They were treated as a criminals, and especially like a terrorist, and they are prosecuted based on national security crime of North Korea.
This video, obtained by CBN News, reportedly shows the execution of North Korean Christians. Do you think that your father is alive today?
No. Everyone knows what happens when government agents arrest Christians in North Korea. They never make it out alive. I know my father is in heaven. And he's praying for North Korea and my family.
Kim's mother, grandmother, and siblings managed to escape that day to the mountains. In 2005, with the help of a Chinese pastor, she crossed the Tumen River and defected to China. Her family followed months later.
It was a difficult decision. I knew that if I got caught, I'd be arrested and sent to a prison camp. But my family defected because we were being persecuted in North Korea for our faith.
Today, she's married and has a baby boy.
I am very proud of what she did. Her family has gone through a lot over the years. She's a hero in my eyes.
Kim is quick to brush aside those compliments, instead giving honor to the man who laid down his life.
I grew up in a land where they said there was no God. But my father told me otherwise. He loved Christ, and for that, he died.
She has a dream to one day go back to Pyongyang and share about this love with the people of North Korea. George Thomas, CBN News, Seoul, South Korea.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Improve personal finances, maintain a lasting marriage, and achieve success in all you do with Pat Robertson's dynamic new book, 10 Laws for Success, Keys to Win in Work, Family, and Finance. These supernatural laws of the universe will help you to overcome life's challenges and to accomplish your goals. Transform yourself and revolutionize your life now with Pat Robertson's 10 Laws for Success. Call now or visit cbn.com.
Welcome back. Well, hundreds of thousands of people are losing loved ones to COVID-19, and many are asking God, why did this happen? Well, not long ago, I met a man who suffered the loss of his beloved wife. So he set out on a journey to find God and the answers he needed to hear. Paul Stutzman lived a great life, happily married, 3 children, and a great job managing a large restaurant in Ohio's Amish country. Then, in 2002, doctors diagnosed his beloved wife, Mary, with breast cancer. Although they did everything they could and believed God would heal her, Mary passed away 4 years later. This devastated Paul, leaving him consumed with a burning question for God.
Where were you when my wife died?
A year after Mary's death, and still with no answer, Paul knew he had to do something different.
And I just felt God saying, it's time, give it up, go on the trail, and I'm going to meet you there.
So Paul quit his job and started his journey on the famous Appalachian Trail, nearly 2,200 miles of rugged wilderness that begins in Springer Mountain, Georgia, and passes through 14 states, ending in Mount Katahdin, Maine. What was going through your mind those nights in the shelter?
The first night on the Appalachian Trail, I'm in my tent, and I'm laying there. I can't sleep because it's raining, and I just gave up a good job to be out here in the woods getting rained on. And so I just sort of reflected back on my life and on how I'd grown up. And I just told God that night, you're going to be my hiking partner, and I want to know I want answers, and I want to know more about grace.
Everybody on the trail has a trail name. What was your trail name?
I picked the trail name Apostle, and I took that name. Obviously, my name is Paul, so I was the Apostle Paul. And 500 miles up the trail is Damascus, Virginia. So I was the Apostle Paul heading to Damascus.
Paul, how did walking in the woods day after day, sleeping in shelters, getting rained on, going hungry sometimes, how did all that help you heal after your wife died?
I was exhausted. My body was exhausted, but my mind was becoming very sharp and in focus. And as the farther I would hike and the more tired I got, the more clear my mind became. And I started seeing a purpose in what God was doing as I'm meeting people.
Day after day, Paul cried out to God. Then, on a Sunday morning, somewhere in New Hampshire, he finally got his answer.
He took me on my face in tears when he revealed to me why I was on this trail. And God said, you're writing a book, put this message in the book.
While it wasn't the personal message he was hoping and expecting, Paul saw it as a word for everyone. Jesus is coming back.
What I heard was that I had to take your wife to get you out here in this mountainside to hear that message. And tell people that I am coming back. I am in control. I know what's going on.
And what would you tell to people that are maybe even now going through the loss of a spouse?
It does get better. It takes time. And with time, the healing comes. And I think it's good to know, though, grieving means we love somebody. The only way not to grieve is not to love. Our loved ones want us to go on with life. You know, they've got it made. They're in heaven. They're just having a ball. But they want us to enjoy life. And there's a lot to enjoy.
And you actually thought about what would be on your tombstone at the end of your life?
Would I just wanted to say I worked all of my life at a restaurant and passed away? Or would I wanted to say he took a chance, he took a risk, and he quit his job, and he hiked the Appalachian Trail? And I decided I wanted to read that way.
What I love about Paul's story is he took his pain and his questions to God, and God turned his worst grief into something beautiful. Well, if you have spiritual questions or just need to contact someone, you can find resources on our webpage at cbn.com, or you can call the 700 Club, 1-800-700-7000 for prayer. We'll be right back.
Nutrition, exercise, essential oils, weight loss, and more. It's Healthy Living with Lori Johnson.
Talk about what's in this.
Join CBN health reporter Lori Johnson to get the latest information from today's top health experts.
This is fantastic.
Find out what you need to know to live a healthier life. Watch Healthy Living, Tuesday night at 9:30. On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
Watch On the Home Front, Tuesdays at 2:30.
Hi, I'm Kevin Sorbo, and I want to tell you about a phenomenal book that I just read, 10 Laws for Success by Pat Robertson. See, I firmly believe it can transform your life and the lives of those that you care about. In this book, Pat shares the supernatural secrets he's discovered and shows you the way to a rich and fulfilling life.
In the book, 10 Laws for Success, Pat shares biblical life principles that can put you on a path to purpose, fulfillment, and achievement. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to receive your own copy today. 10 Laws for Success.
This dynamic book is a must-read for anyone who wants to achieve their goals, build a solid financial foundation, and grow in their relationship with God. I highly recommend that you get your own copy of Pat Robertson's latest book, 10 Laws for Success. God bless you.
Finally this week, Emily Jones brings us the latest from Jerusalem.
Welcome to Jerusalem for this Inside Israel report, where we tell you what's happening in Israel and the Middle East. After 3 elections and more than a year of political deadlock, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his rival Benny Gantz have finally agreed to form a unity government. The rivals announced this week that they have agreed to a power-sharing arrangement. Netanyahu will continue serving as Prime Minister first, and then it will be Gantz's turn. Many breathed a sigh of relief because it means Israel will not be forced into a 4th election.
I think people have been waiting for the leaders of both the Likud and Blue and White to put this unity government together. This is the kind of situation where you don't want to have a political battle. You don't want to have disagreements about what should have been done or what shouldn't have been done. You want the country to pull together.
Meanwhile, Israel continues to battle the coronavirus outbreak and has begun to gradually lift lockdown restrictions. Israel stood still for 2 minutes this week as sirens blared to remember the 6 million Jews who were murdered by the Nazis during the Holocaust. Israel's Day of Holocaust Remembrance, or Yom HaShoah, is one of the most solemn days on the calendar here. This year, instead of the usual annual events, Israelis stayed home and remembered the Holocaust through virtual programs and activities. Yad Vashem held a special pre-recorded state ceremony to remember the victims.
We must remember. We remember. We will continue to remember, for our own sakes and for future generations.
Yad Vashem also hosted a virtual name-reading campaign for the victims that were lost. While the world continues to battle the coronavirus, anti-Semitism is spreading like poison. The rise in anti-Semitism is especially true in Germany, just decades after the Holocaust. Germany's anti-Semitism commissioner said, quote, "There are direct links between the current spread of the coronavirus and that of anti-Semitism. Right-wing radicals have increasingly tried to leverage the coronavirus crisis for their own ends." Unfortunately, this kind of anti-Semitism linked to global pandemics is not new.
Whenever there's a virus like this or a pandemic, scapegoating is right at the top of the list, especially before modern times came about. And the Jewish people have always suffered.
Israeli officials say much of the anti-Semitism is taking place on social media and have urged social media networks to fight this. Well, that's it for this week of Inside Israel. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Emily. And thanks to you for watching us. Goodbye, and from all of us here, God bless you.